I'd like to come back to what you said earlier on. What I've experienced for myself, you can have the mind that is running, but in the background, I don't know how to say that, but it is a bit new to me. It is as if there's not a lot, but the mind is not taking too much room anymore. It was quite interesting to experiment. Great. Could you actually recognize this quality that you have between two thoughts? You know, this tranquility and vastness, or something that is... When we were looking at the trees, I could reach that joy without any object. But I could see the mind that was grasping that immediately. It is almost systematic. It is great just to see that, actually, and see that it is a game from the mind and not entertain it that much. And consciousness has this capacity of focusing and crystallize. Crystallizing, and with this path, to some it is spontaneous, but most of the time what happens is there's a vastness that starts to settle in, and we defocus more and more. Suffering happens when we are very focused, either an emotion or a thought. There is an identification, and then there is limitation, and then this sense of I feel small and finite, and this is not what we are. And at some point, we start feeling what you've been describing, this stepping back from the object, whatever the object is. And we start perceiving, we can't really put words on it, let's say a space, but it is infinite, so putting words on it, it's hard, but so this conscious space will become more and more important to us, and all the phenomena that are appearing in this conscious field are seen for what they are, just impermanent phenomena. And there's a huge rest in that, because when you're in that space, you're home, actually. This is you. This is home. And again, I kept on talking about rest this morning, and it is really relaxing to be able to see things appearing from that space rather than seeing them while being carried by those phenomena is not the same experience. And in a way, everything is here. Everything is awakening. It's a very small shift. It's a tiny movement in a movement. You know, it is as simple as that. You know, like, oh, this is what I am. I'm not this world that is moving all around on the surface, but I am this depth behind it. That is the path that is unraveling. And even after this shift, consciousness keeps on more and more settled, more and more vast. And it's happening on its own. But there's just the belief that there's an ego that is looking for it, but it's not the ego. It's actually a current of love that is going through you and pushes you to find this vastness. Even if you wanted to stop this motion of seeking, you wouldn't be able to. No one started a spiritual path with a personal will. It's just life that brings you back to itself. You don't have any choice. Well, as long as there's an ego there, there's a belief that there's a choice. But what you truly want is not a choice, is what you want is a direction, which is wholeness, completeness, and on the manifested level, whatever you're doing doesn't matter. It's just a current that is bringing you to this completeness. Just follow that. Ramana Maharshi said, when you touch this I am, just stay still, stay there. Just this. There's nothing left, nothing else to do. Just stay still with I am. And remembering to come back to this. It is also happening on its own.
Il y a eu ce déclencheur de ce doigt qui pointe vers ça. À partir de là, ça va automatiquement revenir
It is an automatic
en toi.
movement.
Tiens, je vais retourner vers là. Ah, et ça, c'est pareil, c'est spontané.
It is spontaneous.
Ouais.
The whole game of suffering, life is actually made so that you will start look for look for this safe place, and you just come back to this vastness, and you realize that there's no problems, and it is little by little, by coming back again and again, you'll start thinking, maybe I should let go of identifying with those permanent and all those motions. Maybe I can just stay where I am. You stop thinking that you will have, wholeness in this world, even though you can have, lovely experiences in this world, but it's not going to be taken as something absolutely true. It's just, you'll see it as a game, and there's no more goal or aim in this grasping of the world. That is something that drops, this aim thing, this goal. The walk that we did this morning is an action, and you could actually reflect on, how do I live the fact that I'm walking? Someone will say, oh, I'm going this way, I'm going to go there, and they're not really conscious of a single step that they're taking. Some will actually be watching the decor, or some will stay into the body. How is it in the body when I'm moving and when I'm walking? There's lots of ways to look at an action. The scriptures says in India that the yogi who's fully realized is inactive in the action. There's no action in action. The body is moving, but it is seen as, in consciousness, that it is just a phenomenon. There's not the belief. There's no doer. There's just walking. Walkingness. Hearingness. A fact is just a fact. It's an act is just an act. You need to be actively passive or passively active. Yes, but it induces that you have to do something. It might, push you to think that you have to do something. But the truth is, beingness is simpler than that. The force that makes you walk, it's not making any sound. It's silent. It's the same force that makes all the trees grow or make your heart beat. it is absolutely invisible to the mind, but it is a force. And it does perfectly with a huge intelligence, right? And that's, what is that force? I could say another word, it's just, force is just one word, but it's just that there's no answer from the mind behind this question, what is this force that makes life happen? So how is it, Try and taste right now, how are things, like, how is it right now, this force? What is it made of?
Quand on goûte justement ça,
when we
vraiment
taste,
d'aller y poser les questions qu'on se pose d'habitude. Dire, tiens, depuis là, c'est vu comment cette question?
It is interesting to ask yourself questions. How is it when I look at things from this presence? This idea that there's not the idea, but the fact that there's no ego. Is there really someone that is conscious right now?
Et ça, le valider et le revalider, valider aussi autant que
we need to
possible
keep on validating that here in this presence it's whole and complete, there's nothing missing, and we keep on remembering that so that it actualizes itself. Just by tasting is not enough. In a way, when it is realized, it is enough, but when it's still not entirely realized, just go and investigate what we think is true from this presence. Would you have any advice to give on the length we should be, the amount of time we should be spending meditating every day?
J'ai médité pendant des années et des fois de manière très intensive, donc je peux pas te dire que
I used to meditate for years very intensely, so I can't tell you that it's useless, of course.
Okay. Est-ce que tu as déjà une pratique régulière de la méditation?
Do you have a practice already? No, not at all.
Tu as déjà testé?
Have you tested it already?
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
So what happens then?
De suite, j'ai les idées qui passent.
I can see thoughts appearing. I let them go. I feel like I let them go and come back to my breathing, and then soon I realize there's more and more thinking, and I can't reach that state of detachment, or there's still the mind that is very present.
Okay.
All right.
Rarement dans la vie tu pourras changer les situations de la vie.
Rarely in life will you be able to change a situation, and thoughts are part of the current of life. It's the same force that creates the thoughts and creates the wind or the waves in the ocean. It is part of life. It is thinking. There is thinking happening. So to wish to stop the thinking is actually, there's a bit of an idealization of this idea that meditation is a state where there's no more thinking. Well, when you meditate and there are thoughts, what is going to bring you peace is not the fact that you won't have any thoughts. It's the relationship that you have towards the thoughts that are appearing. Whatever it is, physical or emotional, or the thoughts, whatever the relationship you have this to a situation is what's gonna.
Non, c'est plus simple que ça. Comment tu les
what I mean is, how do you welcome them? How are they welcomed? Are you resisting the thinking? No, I'm just trying to make them pass. to and have normal thoughts. And I realize that there are some that I haven't seen. Yeah, but that's normal. There's a will behind it. What you awakening is realizing that there's no one meditating. Okay, let's cut through the chase and avoid yourself 15 years of meditation. As long as you meditate with the idea that I want the thoughts to stop, the ego is very happy. Me, I want to be in a state of meditation where there's no thinking, and I'll be very happy, me, because me, will be meditating, me, without thoughts. Awakening is no more me. And the best way to realize that is just to let life express itself, to not fight it and not identify with anything. And you'll realize that there is a space in which there are thoughts arising, and this space is not touched, impacted. And you can validate that when you see it, like Suyin was saying, validate it, touch it, and taste it. How was the meditation this morning? I had trouble feeling this space without thinking. The thoughts kept on coming, right? Okay.
Comme tu étais en train d'observer les pensées et non pas d'essayer d'en faire quelque chose.
And when you were
parce que là, dans ta méditation habituelle, tu essaies
observing
de
these
c'est-à-dire
thoughts,
faire disparaître ou les calmer. Là, je proposais pas ça, je proposais juste de les observer.
I was just proposing to observe them, not change them or stop them. Déjà? Is there a difference when you do that, just by observing?
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
What happens then?
Donc là, je comprends maintenant ce que tu me dis ce matin.
I get what you mean now. This morning I didn't get that.
Parce que si tu veux, pour moi, la pratique
to me,
vraiment efficace,
a very effective practice is not just to observe the thinking and observing the breathing, which is kind of mindfulness. I think that's what they're doing with mindfulness meditation, but is to actually bring your attention, turn your attention towards what is perceiving. Or maybe to become aware of what is noticing the thoughts. And you just let the thoughts arise as they are, and your interest will actually turn towards what is observing that, what is conscious of that. And you'll be able to see that this is never caught into the thinking. It's always the witness. It will depend on everyone. It will depend for everyone, you know. People will be able to meditate for hours and hours and hours. Some won't be able to spend more than 10 minutes. I think it depends on each person. So it is just up to you. Whatever you feel like doing is good. Thank you. There's no obligation. No, of course not. No. More than the time, the amount of time, it's more regularity that is interesting to anchor what you're doing.
Classiquement parlant, c'est au même endroit à la même heure tous les jours.
The best way is the same place, the same time.
Et tu peux aussi faire plusieurs
the same amount of time.
Différentes façons de faire, mais tu peux faire 6 fois 5 minutes dans la journée.
And you can do several times, you know, like 6 times a day if you feel like it, you know. And it can be 6 times for 5 minutes.
Je médite assez peu en dehors. Par contre, dans mon travail, après j'ai un travail qui aide pas mal, mais j'arrive à un moment donné à être
I do
méditant en fait.
meditate while I'm working. I don't do it outside my work, but during my work, it actually helps.
Oui, ça dépend de ton travail.
Yeah, it is depending on what you do, of course. Yeah,
un peu plus facile, ouais. C'est sûr que si tu dois
some jobs are easier to. If you have to use your mind, your intellect a lot, it might be harder to meditate.
Oui, bien sûr. Ouais. Ça a à voir avec la qualité de présence aussi.
And it has to do with the quality of presence that you bring to this meditation. I work with wood, and I ask myself, once, where is wood coming from? And while meditating, and I got sort of projected into a forest, and I spent, I don't know how long in this space. This is what I'm talking about, this relationship towards the situation. Lots of people try and meditate, but they kind of force it, and it's not working. It's way quicker to when you try and at least you try not to resist to whatever is appearing. That's the first step. At least could we let things be as they are? And that is quite very relaxing because there's nothing to do. There's no need for complicated techniques. There's a deep rest that arises. Everything becomes easier because meditating with a goal, you actually get out of now. You're not in meditation anymore. If you really want a peace of mind, you're already projected somewhere else. You're not there anymore, so you've lost. You're not in beingness, but you are, but you are projected somewhere else. So you taste it less. It's less savorous. So it is about embracing everything. It's all through the heart. It makes things so much easier and comfortable. What does it make you feel to meditate with all of us? Why are we all meditating together? Group meditation does help. Group Shakti is the energy of the group is helping. To me, it doesn't do anything to me, but before I could feel the difference. But there is this aspect of connectedness. There is a nice taste to it.
Le monde, comment dire, le rêve collectif, en fait.
It is
si par exemple
quelqu'un
sort du rêve et puis se retrouve dans
connected
sa famille,
or collective
les gens qui
dream.
sont encore dans le rêve, il va très vite se faire réabsorber dans le rêve à cause de cet impact collectif. Donc quand on médite
When
ensemble,
we meditate together,
on fait aussi le mouvement inverse, sortir du rêve.
We get out of this collective dream and we do it consciously together, so it is more impacting. Yes, reason why we call it Satsang, it's to gather around the truth and to take that time in life. I don't think there's anything more precious than that. Even the scriptures say that it is the most important thing to gather around the truth. What will make the mind believe that we're not what we thought we were? What is it? What is going to make us believe that? Because if the mind doesn't believe it, it's never going to stick around or unravel, unfold entirely. So the more we talk about it, the more we see other people believing that, the more it helps. Reason why we're sharing.
Pour que ça devienne de plus en plus tangible, réel pour tout le monde, et pas juste
for it to become more tangible. It's, to stop believing that it's just a story, or to drop the idea that you need to meditate for numerous lives.
J'ai une question par rapport justement à cette notion de présence.
I have a question regarding this presence.
Dans le sens où, disons, fut un temps où je pensais entre guillemets m'en sortir seul, ou voilà,
I thought for a while I could go on my own with this seeking, through books and books. I don't need anyone. I can do it on my own. This is me doing it. I'm good enough. But in Satsang, there is this importance of the master or masters that are here, or the persons that are in contact with presence, this presence. And could we at some point maybe not talk and just be in presence with each other? Is it a functioning...
Le mot n'est pas forcément bien choisi, mais c'est ce qui me vient par contamination. En fait.
Oui.
Is there some sort of contamination?
D'autres choses.
Ce qu'on dit n'est pas important.
That is absolutely true. What we're saying is really not important. Well, yes, I know, it's not the most important.
Oui.
There is a force behind the words.
Il y a l'impact, comme tu dis, la contamination.
The contamination, silent contamination, energetic, is happening, of course. And the words, add a layer to it. But we could absolutely stay still and silent.
Ça se situe pas à un niveau juste des mots, quoi.
It is not on the single level of words. There's, it is vibratory.
C'est la fameuse fréquence qui...
It is the frequency in that.
Chaque fois que tu côtoies quelqu'un qui a réalisé quelque chose, tu
Every time
contaminé par cette réalisation, contaminé entre guillemets.
You spend time with someone who's realized something, you are being contaminated, quote unquote.
En tout cas, quand on est en
But Indian people say that it is important when you are in this process of awakening is to be careful with who you are spending time with. If you keep on spending time with people who are very, very materialistic, you can if you want, of course, but it is important to be careful with that. But naturally, when you are on a path, awakening path, you will tend to seek for people on the same path. It does a lot, it works a lot with video too, because there's no distancing in truth. There's no space. Or there is a sort of savor of flavor, common flavor. Even if everyone is different in the form, in the shapes, there is the common flavor, common perfume that you can sense. And this is this perfume, this that will impregnate people around them. The big change in our era, first earlier on, or we used to have this sense of master and disciples, a lineage. But now consciousness is so ripe that it's way easier now to identify, for people to identify themselves with someone who's awakened, quote unquote. There's this recognition of you're just talking about me, really. I can feel it. I can recognize that. You talked about astral master, someone who touched your forehead and you had an ecstatic experience. Does that exist on this manifested level? This? Yes, it does. It's only just it's just an experience. Sometimes just even a word.
Alors après, il y a toujours par rapport à ce qu'on a dit tout à l'heure, il y a la situation, il y a la relation à la situation. Et très souvent, il y a beaucoup de gens qui pensent que...
So we were talking about, a situation and relationship to a situation, and people tend to think they might have, experienced something quite extraordinary with a master, and they think it's connected to the master, but it's not that. It's actually you've authorized yourself, you've opened yourself to this experience. It comes from you, and it is important to realize that there's no two presences, there's only one presence. So there is a truth in this energy, but the matter of fact is that there's no difference between Jesus, Buddha, and you. And this, it can be quite hard for people to realize that, to accept that there's no hierarchy, to accept that they are that. It is important to really realize that. I went through some sort of adoration at some point, and it can be good because it creates an opening in you. And after the shift, several things changed quite radically. I used to, grab a picture of Mama Tamayi or Ramana Maharshi, and I would just realize that there was no more reverence, like no more adoration. It was just recognizing that it was presence there. We're all the same thing in different shapes, but it's the same presence, same force, like I said, making the trees grow or the flowers. The only difference that is the difference is that the human being is capable of being conscious of being consciousness. That is one of the differences. It's the only differences. This capacity, the human being to be conscious of being consciousness. When you were talking about baby, a 3 months old, I have trouble imagining that or understanding that he, before the stage of the mirror, like we said in psychology, before this stage, the baby is not conscious of himself. He doesn't have any consciousness of being separated. So even though he doesn't feel separation, he's not conscious of being conscious. Yes, that's the only difference. The baby is fully in consciousness, but he's not fully and absolutely conscious of being consciousness. But he does live this wholeness, this completeness. And why? Bliss is proportionate to the degree of identification. The more you crystallize within this identity, the further you are from bliss. So, take every human being, every time there's an experience of blissfulness, every time it's linked to this oblivion of the me, of the ego, even in sports or just walking in nature or watching a movie. But all those blissful moments are linked to this oblivion of this identification, or even when you're just giving. The equation is quite simple. So being consciousness minus a me equals blissfulness. To recognize that is up to a point where there's no need to put yourself in some sort of state, to experience that, because it is an effort to add a me. Beingness doesn't need to do anything to be. I really enjoyed the meditation, but even more the walk. This morning, we were quite excited. Because I've experienced moments of silence like that. Like some sort of Zen walking. And there was something rigorous or a method, and we had to do things a certain way, and I really enjoyed the way you propose that
dans l'esprit du jeu.
Et dans l'esprit du jeu,
in this playfulness, just to, do you feel like doing that?
On va faire un truc,
And I could see it, I saw myself being quite used to resist to someone, saying we're going to do this or that. I tend to resist. But this time I was very happy. And you said something about not naming too, and I saw this leaf on a tree and I said, oh, this is a leaf, and I could see the absolute joy of being able to name it, and right after that I just dropped it, and there was such an openness being there without naming and walking without knowing where we would go, what the trail would be.
Je croise le regard de Camille, je sais plus trop si on avance, si on s'arrête, si on tout s'est fait très spontanément.
It was such a spontaneous happening.
Camille s'assoit, tout le monde s'assoit.
Everyone sits down. It was
Nous sommes un.
we were just one.
Dis pas ouais, c'était très très agréable.
It was really nice.
Très agréable. Vous avez fait ça ce matin? Là, tout à l'heure, juste avant.
Yeah, we did that
Non, mais sous les arbres,
a little earlier on.
Une toute petite promenade, hein.
Really small, quick walk.
Allez, randonnée.
On a marché doucement.
It wasn't a trek or anything, Not even mindfulness, mindful walking. No.
Mon Dieu. Soyez alignés.
Be aligned, things like that.
Très très agréable, mais surtout cette douceur, quoi, cette invitation à la simplicité, quoi. Moi, ça me détend totalement.
This invite to simplicity is really relaxing to me. Yeah, there's a key in this playfulness.
Sur YouTube, mais la première vidéo que je mets, je partage mon parcours.
In the first video that I've shared on YouTube, I've shared about my path.
21h30 en 24 août.
I went to bed, I was 19 years old. It was 9:30.
C'était bien vers 21h30, mais c'était un 28 février.
Ah, okay.
Et comme quoi on retient les dates.
Celle-là, on la retient.
C'est obligé.
Et comme ça, de nulle part, il y a une pensée qui vient.
And
et la pensée, c'est
there was a thought
si
that
je jouais
rose.
à arrêter de penser. C'est pas si j'arrêtais de penser, c'est si je jouais.
What would happen if I, just for fun, just to play, what would happen if I stopped thinking? I didn't, said to myself, I will stop thinking. I just thought, what would it feel just to play?
C'est une clé. Essaye quand tu vas méditer de jouer à arrêter de penser, ou de jouer avec tes pensées, je sais pas, joue.
Every time you meditate, try and make it a game. Be playful with observing what is watching.
Alors j'avais lu sur internet que dans un moment d'éveil, il y
Same for me.
qui s'allumait en même temps.
I read somewhere on the internet that when there's awakening, there's some sort of all the waves in the brain would, kind of
quand on part dans l'imaginaire. Donc j'ai vraiment joué à faire comme si c'était possible d'être à la fois réveillé, endormi et dans l'imaginaire.
So I was just playing with the idea of being, both awake in a dreamy state and in a deep sleep state. And because I was just playing with that, it happened, which was quite funny. And there was no tension with I wasn't trying to get anything from it. I was just playing. It was fun to explore. So reading books can be good, but it also can be, a bit of a trap, because if you put some sort of high stake in what you're reading,
sans attente, on observe un scientifique, il est dans cet état d'esprit finalement.
If you put yourself in the position of a scientist that is just observing, and the scientist just observes and just see what's going to happen, that can help to put yourself in that mode.
Quand je m'y remets, parce qu'on a été un peu traumatisés en méditation, là on a arrêté, je dis on, mais
I stopped meditating because I've been kind of traumatized with, it's a sort of conditioning with you have to be relaxed.
C'est un ordre.
Soyez détendu. T'as pas le droit de bouger, mais tu dois être super détendu.
You're not allowed to move, but you have to be relaxed.
Du coup, j'ai résisté beaucoup et bon, je m'y remets un petit peu tout doucement et encore. Voilà, et donc les pensées ont tendance à
so I'm starting again slowly, and I can feel the thoughts that are quite.
Et là, rien. J'attends et je dis jamais rien qui me met.
C'est génial ça.
You ask the question, what is going to be your next thought, and then nothing. And that is, well, that's good. When you can see that your mind is caught in the thinking process, you just stop. You just stop yourself and just, okay, I'm just going to wait for the next one. What is going to be the next one? And it stops. And it's quite interesting. It's a good key, a good practice.
Et après, j'ai vu les conditionnements arriver.
And I saw all the conditionings, all the thoughts. I saw why they were coming. I saw all the movie, and I understood the movie quite quickly. And it allowed me.
C'est un peu intime, donc.
D'accord, par rapport à un sujet précis.
Allowed me to realize what I needed to do or let go of. So it was quite intimate, but anyway, it was good.
J'ai pas tout à fait vu ça. J'ai vu la petite fille.
I saw the little girl being conditioned with a story with her father.
Mais déjà peut-être que tu as vu que t'étais pas déjà ça.
Well, maybe you have seen that you weren't that. Yes, I saw that. I saw that wasn't. Yes, I saw that it was a tension of a moment, and I was living that tension again, like 50 years after. But there was no need for it, and there was nothing to do about it. Just see it.
C'est automatique.
It's automatic.
Voir,
seeing
enlever toutes les zones d'ombre automatiquement. La conscience est pure lumière.
Cast light on every shadows, every little shade or shadows that you have that might be there with you is going to be lightened up with consciousness just by seeing it.
J'aurais dit quelque chose à quelqu'un pour faire quelque chose.
Yeah, I could see that before that I would have said something, I would have acted on it, but just seeing it was enough.
Il faut une démarche thérapeutique pour vraiment des choses qui sont de l'ordre du traumatisme.
Well, I did notice that sometimes the trauma is so deep that you might need to do something about it, or even just having someone on your side that is helping you going through that.
Et à partir de là, elle a vraiment besoin de reconnaissance, cette partie-là, pour pouvoir
I could see that sometimes parts of us
de toute manière, reconnaître, c'est voir.
Are so traumatized that it needs to be recognized. And it has to do with seeing.
Oui, donc, t'as certainement...
Mais il est encore là, la trace.
Voilà, c'est encore là.
There was
encore là. Mais maintenant, la trace,
a trace left.
Ne fait plus,
there was still a little bit left. I could see that I can see that it's still here, but it's not affecting me anymore. Yeah, it's going to drop at some point entirely.
Il y a beaucoup de choses qui tombent d'elles-mêmes.
There are a lot of things that drop on their own. We think that we have a lot to do as a person, to transcend addictions or. But what's really magical is it's happening. It happens on its own. When you come to what you are, consciousness sees. And in a way, consciousness just scraps everything.
Et donc ça se fait tout seul. C'est un degré de conscience, tu vois.
It's happening on its own. It's a certain degree of consciousness that is doing the whole thing on its own.
Il y a 5 étapes. Moi, en tout cas, j'en vois 5.
I see 5 steps in an emotion. Like there's first is you. There's anger and you fall into it. Second step is you see it, and there's a few seconds, am I going to go into it or not? You have a choice, but you go into it. Third step is you see that there's anger, and you take a step back and yet, no, I'm not going to go into it. Fourth step is anger is just passing by. And the fifth step is just playing with anger. People think you're angry, but you're not. And every of my students in meditation keep telling me the same. I can liberate myself from this anger. I can see that I can not fall into it, have a step back. All the mechanisms, all the patterns are seen. It is like time is reducing itself.
Mais là, tu as le temps en fait. Tu vois tout le schéma qui arrive au ralenti, la contraction, énergétique qui monte.
At first, you don't have
tout le temps en fait.
You have all the time in the world actually. It's like at first you don't have the time to see the anger, you're already in it. And then you can see all the contractions happening and you see anger coming up and you can see the identification and it's what happens is you're not identified anymore to this anger. If you look at all those conditionings, you can actually see where it comes from, like in your family. If it's spontaneous, yes, it's a good thing, okay. But if it's spontaneous, it's good. If you think about it, I wouldn't go into that. It's just the big comprehension of things. It's just spontaneous that is happening. I just, this is where it's coming from, and you can laugh about it. And thank you, everybody, because it was such a great game. We've been laughing quite a lot, quite a bit, and it's not personal sadness anymore because you realize that it's not yours. It's, for instance, if it's sadness, it is a little bit like when you wake up in the morning and you've been hurt in a dream and you realize in the morning that you are not hurt. It is that same kind of understanding, yes. This is something that happened to me. I've had a huge vision, understanding about what happened in the family, and then it just dropped, and I couldn't think and remember it anymore after a few seconds. I was trying to grab it, I'm trying to remember. It was evacuated so quickly that I couldn't get it anymore, but I couldn't remember it.
Et puis ça arrive là, et là, il n'y a plus rien. Mince, bon, ça repart dans l'autre sens. Puis au bout d'un moment, ça n'arrive plus du tout, puisque ça voit qu'il n'y a rien en fait.
The mind, at first starts to try and grasp it, and then just drops. It's a plasticity. It's a habit of doing things for the mind and neurons.
Donc l'observation est très importante. Voir les mécanismes, c'est...
Observing is very important. As long as it's not seen, we keep falling into it. As long as it's not seen, when you don't see the mechanisms that make you or operate in you, you'll still fall into it. You need to see them to avoid or not fall into them anymore. The first sages in India, rishis, which means those who see. So as soon as you see, you're not caught anymore. As soon as you see that the personal me is just an aggregate of concepts and beliefs, the story we carry with us, age, or when we see that this is concepts being put together, it's just an idea. When you see that, you can't believe in it anymore. And we go from the idea of I'm a person with a consciousness inside myself, to this realization that I am consciousness in which a body appears with all the rest, a body and with a conceptualizing and perceiving system. Look right now, you're not a consciousness in a body, you are consciousness in which emerges whatever is emerging right now.
Vous pouvez peut-être juste fermer les yeux et mettre l'attention sur ce
Try
corps.
and close your eyes, put attention towards it, toward this body.
Juste voilà, simplement ça, cette chose que vous appelez un corps.
This thing that you call a body. If you take away this interpretation, this description, body, what's left?
Un ensemble de sensations, on pourrait dire. Il reste ça, vibrations.
Sensations, vibrations, presence, maybe.
Et voyez qu'il n'y a vraiment aucun contour. Essayez de voir.
See that there's absolutely no contours.
Regardez.
Have a look for yourself.
La frontière entre la peau et
Can you find the frontier, the border between the body and the air? Can you define properly where it begins and when one begins and the other one finishes?
Si vous entrez au cœur de la perception,
if you get into
il n'y a pas vraiment de densité.
At the heart of the perception,
Des courants vibratoires.
you'll see that there's no density to it, it's just vibration, vibratory currents.
Ces vibrations, elles apparaissent
Those vibrations
au sein d'un espace conscient.
appear within a conscious field.
Il y a un espace,
There's
il y
a
a une conscience
space, there's
qui
a
perçoit les
consciousness
vibrations.
that perceives vibrations.
Essayez de ne pas visualiser.
Try not to visualize.
Goûtez juste ce que ça fait d'être conscient.
Just
Conscient de cette
taste what it feels like to be conscious of this vibration.
Et là, vous pouvez peut-être voir que être conscient de cette vibration, c'est pas à l'intérieur d'un corps.
And you'll see that to be conscious of this vibration is not happening within the
Conscient de cette
body.
vibration, c'est aussi être conscient du
To
son
be
de ma voix, par
conscious
exemple,
of this
qui semble
vibration, it's to be
à
conscious
l'extérieur de
about
notre corps.
of my voice, which appears to be outside the body.
Il y a toutes les sensations
But there's
internes, puis il y a les sensations
all the
externes.
inner sensations and all the external sensations, but all of that appears to consciousness, to your consciousness. So nothing is outside this consciousness.
Toutes les perceptions apparaissent au sein d'un espace.
All the perceptions appear in a space, within a space. Absolutely every perception.
Peut-être aussi que vous pouvez porter votre attention sur
maybe try and turn your attention towards what's beneath all those perceptions. There's the perceptions, and then there's the space itself within which everything appears.
Comment est l'espace au sein duquel les perceptions?
How is this space in which everything appears?
Est-ce que c'est pas la source de la stabilité?
Isn't it the source of this stability? Stillness?
Toujours été là?
Has it always been here, or is it new?
Est-ce qu'ici il y a encore un besoin?
Is there any will or need left here?
Est-ce que cet espace peut être affecté, troublé, dérangé par quoi que ce soit?
This space, can it be impacted or touched by anything that is appearing within it, or does its nature, essence stays the same whatever happens?
Cette nature immuable qui ne fluctue jamais.
This unmovable
Ce que vous êtes.
Nature that never moves is really what you are.
Et ici, tout est bienvenu.
Everything is welcome here.
Regardez qu'est-ce qu'il en est du petit moi.
Look at the little me from this space. How is it considered?
Une réalité?
Can you find any substance to it, any reality to it?
ce moi je distinct du reste, est-ce
This
qu'il y a
little
encore un
me,
sens ici?
me, does it have any kind of sense here, meaning?
Est-ce qu'il y a même besoin d'un temps ici?
Is there a need for a time, even here?
Laissez-vous tomber dans
Let-
ce je ne sais pas.
Let yourself fall into this I don't know.
S'il y a des mouvements du mental qui cherchent à rechercher,
Is there any movement from the mind that might be looking for something? Look, even that is welcome.
Et s'il y a dans votre vie actuelle des
If there
questions ou des
are questions
des
in your
problèmes à
life,
résoudre, des choses
or
de cet ordre,
problems
vous
to
pouvez peut-être les
resolve,
poser là et voir quelle est la
maybe
réponse qui en sort.
you could put them here and see what answer could come up.
Est-ce qu'il y a quoi que ce soit qui ne devrait pas être comme c'est?
Is there anything that shouldn't be the way it is when it is seen from this space?
Vous pouvez voir que cette pure présence à ce qui est tel que c'est a toujours été là.
You can see that this presence has always been here. It's always been
On pourrait dire d'une certaine manière que vous n'avez jamais été seul.
supporting every of your experiences. You could even say that you've never been alone
Sur le plan relatif.
on a relative level.
vous voyez qu'il n'y a pas tant d'efforts à faire que ça pour
See that there's
être
not much
s'impose.
effort to do to be. Being
On peut juste
just is.
se déposer là.
You could rest in that here.
Peut-être que certains d'entre vous peuvent sentir aussi qu'est-ce qui se passe au niveau
Some
de la
of you
poitrine, au niveau du cœur.
may feel something
Il y a
happening
comme
around
une
the heart,
détente qui
the
peut se
chest,
produire,
sort of
comme une
relaxing,
sensation de chaleur, d'ouverture.
relaxation or a warmth or an opening.
D'amour dans le sens
Or
d'un
love.
oui à la vie.
Love in a yes sense, a yes to life.
Faire un petit jeu.
We can
Vous entendez la mouche.
play a little game. You can hear this
Essayez
fly.
juste de
Try and
vivre ce qui est produit, la perception produite par la mouche, mais sans visualiser mouche.
try and experience
De goûter ce qui se passe là.
what happens with this fly flying around without adding any concept or image of a fly.
Sentir la vibration.
Just feel the vibration. How is it?
Sans ajouter le concept mouche.
Without adding the concept of a fly.
Rentrez complètement dans l'expérience.
Dive entirely into this experience.
Vous voyez que c'est tout de suite plus confortable.
You can see for yourself that it
Et
is
même sentir que vous
more
êtes
comfortable.
l'expérience elle-même.
You can even see that you are
Il y a
experiencing
pas de frontière
itself.
entre vous et
There's no
l'expérience de la mouche.
frontier between you and the experience of the fly. And there's joy in the very act of living this.
Alors, qu'est-ce que ça fait d'être une mouche?
So, how does it feel to be a fly? Does bzz. Feels like bzz.
Est-ce que ça a été le fait d'entendre le son de la mouche sans visualiser mouche par-dessus?
Was it all right to experience the fly, the sound, without adding an image?
Et après, t'as pas réussi. Ouais, voilà, c'est ça. Oui, normal.
I started with conceptualizing, but afterwards I was able to drop the image. Yeah,
On disait tout
good.
à l'heure par rapport à la méditation.
This is what we were talking about earlier around about meditation. You can't change the situation, but you can change the relationship to this situation. That you can change.
Si on va au cœur de l'expérience,
If we go into the heart of an experience of a fly, for instance, or flying
il
fly,
y a une grande joie.
there's a deep joy.
Ça, je ne saurais pas trop comment l'expliquer.
I don't know how to explain that.
Je ne saurais pas l'expliquer. Je ne peux pas l'expliquer. Mais
I don't know how to explain that.
ce qui ternit l'expérience, c'est ce qui est ajouté à l'expérience.
What
C'est comme un
tarnishes
vernis
the
qu'on ajoute.
experience is what is added to the experience. It's
Se
like
rajoute par-dessus,
a nail
l'expérience.
paint,
Et
nailing
ça-
paint that is
ça
added
fait
on
que
the experience, and that
on
makes
vit
it
pas vraiment l'expérience.
so that we don't really live the experience, and to live really the experience is to be one with the experience. It's the joy of unity. That's what creates that joy.
Dès qu'on se sépare de l'expérience,
As soon as we separate
il y a quelque
ourselves
chose
from
qui
the
se-
experience, there's something that
qui nous coupe de cette nature
there's
de
a
la vie
cut, a cutting from life.
C'est-
Donc il y a de la difficulté avec la mouche
And
tant qu'on pense
there's
à
a
la mouche,
difficulty
la main, puis
with
alors,
the
elle se
fly
relâche, elle médite,
when we think,
etc.
oh, there's a fly, it shouldn't be here,
Mais
meditating.
par contre,
But as soon as we actually
quand on va au cœur de l'expérience, il y a de la joie.
go into the very heart of the experience, there
Et
is
ce qui peut
joy.
paraître complètement fou pour
And
le
what
mental,
might
mais
appear absolute crazy to the
j'ai
mind,
expérimenté plusieurs fois,
and that I've been
c'est que dans les états,
experimenting
que ce soit
quite a
même de douleur
lot,
physique
even
ou,
with physical
émotionnelle,
pain or deep emotional
jugée
pain.
difficile par le
Like,
mental,
you know,
c'est
that
toujours
would
le
be
mental qui
judged
juge. Vous avez
quite
remarqué,
hard by the
on ne
mind.
juge pas.
Have you ever noticed
pas
that
de
consciousness
jugement, vous
never
êtes,
judge whatever is appearing when you're in this
Eh
beingness?
bien, on peut
So,
jouir de
you can
l'expérience
actually
de la
enjoy
tristesse, par exemple. Pourquoi?
deeply
Parce
the
que
experience of sadness, for instance.
une émotion,
Why?
en fait,
Because
c'est
an
la
emotion is vibration,
donc, si vous allez au cœur de
crystallized. So if you go in
l'expérience, c'est
deep
vibratoire.
into it, it's
Tout comme le
vibratory,
c'est pareil, hein.
same as a
Et quand il y
fly,
a pas de
really.
jugement,
And
eh
since
ben, ça
there's
peut
no
être goûté
judgment, it
comme
can be
étant joyeux.
tasted as
Parce qu'il y a
being very
unité avec
joyful
cette
because
vibration.
there's unity with
C'est comme ça
this
que je le vis.
vibration. This is how I
Et,
live it.
je dis pas que c'est tout le temps comme ça.
I don't know
mais
that
j'ai
it,
souvent vécu
it
comme
is
ça.
always like
Et
that,
là
but
aussi,
I've experienced that quite often.
il y a une clé ici.
And there's a
C'est
key
vraiment ça,
there.
c'est-
On peut le vivre aussi avec la douleur physique.
We can live it with physical pain too.
Ouais.
You have.
Je dis pas que c'était tout le temps le cas non plus.
Ouais.
hein.
I'm not saying that it was joyful all the
Il y
time,
a eu comme ça
but there was moments,
cette expérience d'être avec la
those
douleur,
experiences that
de
of
ressentir
being
juste
with
de
the
l'amour pour
pain
l'expérience qui est en train d'être
and feeling love
Sans rejet.
towards whatever
Et,
experience was arising without rejecting
Et la
anything,
joie
and the
de se
joy
sentir
of
vivant à travers cette expérience.
feeling alive through that
C'est ça
experience
aussi dans
was
l'émotion qui peut paraître
great.
difficile. L'émotion peut paraître difficile, mais si on va
an emotion
derrière ça,
can feel
il y a
quite hard,
une
but
émotion
behind
nous fait
that
nous sentir vivants.
there's an
Ça, c'est
emotion
vrai.
of feeling alive, and it is so joyful.
Mais là, on transcende complètement
And we transcend
l'expérience quand
entirely the
on voit ça.
experience when we see
Si on
that.
enlève le concept
If
de
we take
l'émotion
away
elle-même,
the concept of an
on
emotion,
retrouve de l'énergie
Tout à
it's
fait.
we can see that
Au-delà
it's
de
just
la
pure
douleur, quand
energy,
c'est
c'est le terme
or
émotion,
even
c'est énergie,
pain, or
movement.
Ouais.
oui, énergie.
it is a movement.
Si on met pas le concept,
If we don't put any concept on it, can you go deeper into this notion of what is conscious about it? Can you go a little further? There's the perception,
Ouais,
and there's also what's conscious about it.
ouais, ouais,
Can you elaborate?
Quelle étape suivante? Il y a un glissement entre le fait que c'est ma colère, et puis il y a une
There's a
colère,
shift from
puis il y a
this
le
is
fait
my
qu'on a
anger
l'impression vers-
towards
Voilà.
Donc
there's
les
anger,
étapes,
and
quand il y a
then
une
towards what's
émotion qui est-
perceiving.
qui est
You're talking
difficile.
about
La
steps.
première étape, c'est
First
rester
step
avec
is to
l'émotion, donc ce qu'on disait ce
whatever
matin,
emotion is here, to
on
stay
essaie pas
with
de la-
it.
On n'essaie pas de la fuir, de s'en
Or
débarrasser,
we're
ni de
not trying to
l'analyser, de la
run
comprendre. Ça, c'est des
away from it,
stratégies encore
or
pour pas la
to
ressentir.
comprehend it, understand it, which is a way of running away from it, actually. Okay. So you just stay with it. You allow yourself to stay with it, saying, okay, it is okay. And just by staying here, you can put your attention towards what's conscious of it, aware of it. What is noticing this emotion? So we go from I am angry to there is anger coming up. Then the next step is to see if what's conscious of this anger is angry itself or just neutral and being just perceiving this anger. Is this what you were thinking about? It's still the step of validating that this consciousness is not impacted by any kind of sadness or anger. It's not pushing it away. It's just being conscious of it. There's a fear that might come up. There's a situation, a fear comes up, so fear is here, right? Attention turns to what's conscious about this fear, and what's conscious of that, aware of that. Is it fearful? Again and again and again. It's not afraid. It is absolute security there, safety. And it can be, anything can be passed. Can pass through this consciousness, and it's not impacted. I went through a moment where I was absolutely terrified, and I tried what you're saying. I tried everything, let go, not letting go. If you are terrorized, to me, it's linked to a trauma. This approach is not enough. I've tried it also. There is a need for a therapeutic work to do. The TP method is quite good. TIPI.
C'est-à-dire que ça va être se connecter un instant à la peur,
you have to connect.
En termes de sensations.
You connect with the fear, but in terms of sensations. And you let the body do its work, which is evacuate the sensations.
Ça déracine en fait complètement le trauma en quelques
the roots of the trauma can, or even maybe just a few seconds or a few minutes, the roots of this trauma can actually be dropped by the body. You can do it with someone. But you can do it by yourself or with someone. There's a protocol to follow, that's all. It is a bit hard when you're right into the middle of what's happening. And she's describing something like she wanted to obtain something, to get rid of. Because you wanted to run away from the sensation.
Oui, mais il y a des choses, comme je disais tout à l'heure, tant que c'est supportable, parce qu'il y a des choses avec lesquelles on ne peut pas.
As long as it's bearable, that's all right. But sometimes there are things that we can't stay with what's here. So if it's not possible, then it's not the approach that is appropriate. You have to go a little further. But most of the time, most of our sensations and emotions during the day, daily life, we can go through that. But sometimes it's way too violent, and it's so hurtful to try and do that to ourselves.
Alors ça c'est pareil pour tout sur le chemin. C'est les gros dossiers, on va dire, tu les travailles pas au moment où ça arrive.
The big traumas, you usually don't work. You don't usually work on big traumas when they come up. It usually takes a bit of time. Yes, it was about taking up, flying, and I wasn't expecting it to be so. Fearful to me. So there's an exercise you could do then when you're still tranquil and you put yourself, even just thinking about the idea of being in a plane, I can feel that there's something coming up. This is the room, do it when you know that you don't have to fly and just by thinking about it, and there's no high stakes. and go right into the sensations. As soon as there's an emotion rising up, you just dive into it, you just drop everything, the story,
Parce que là, ça désamorce complètement
you drop the world, you just,
la peur,
the roots of it just drop.
Et la rassurer aussi que c'est pas aussi
And
insupportable.
reassure yourself that it's not as hard to feel that we think. We are, most of the time we are fearful, we fear the fear itself. You have way more to gain from staying with it than to run away from it. And it works with everything. Same with addictions, desires.
Le seul piège, c'est de pas suivre moi j'appelle ça les flashs mentales.
Is to is to follow all the flashes from the mind. I call them flashes. It's
il faut être dans le pur vécu, dans ce qu'on appelle le vécu direct. C'est maintenant quoi. Sinon,
what's interesting, what's important, if you project, that's not gonna work. But if something appears right here, right now, that's when it's interesting to stay with, not with the story of the mind, but with the body.
Plutôt que dire j'ai mal fait. Je me suis fait embarquer dans le mental.
And rather to judge yourself if you've actually gone with the mind. Do not judge yourself. It is only an invite. You've noticed, like, shit, I've been with the mind, I've gone with the mind, but you've actually seen it, so it's good. So you can actually come back what's been experienced now. We were flying towards, great islands, and it was so gorgeous. And I could feel through the fear, seconds of wonder. Everything was so beautiful, and there was religious people on this plane, and I thought to myself, that's good. We're going to go to paradise, heaven, if we crash, so that's all right. And going back, I actually took a pill to calm myself, but I was so afraid that it didn't work. I know a sage in India that talk about a story that's true, a true story. A disciple of a very famous master that go into a plane, and right before he gets into the plane, and a telegram saying, have a good flight. And so the disciple, knowing that his master doesn't do that ever, is like, why does he do that? All right. So the plane goes up, and halfway, the plane starts, rumbling. The pilot says, we have, huge problem with the plane. We're not sure we're going to go through it, so maybe you should start praying. Disciple gets up. Only Indian people. It is a true story from the 20th century. Well, obviously, because there were no planes before that. So, but anyway, so.
Peut-être une expérience que vous avez fait dans l'astral.
C'était Bouddha.
Et donc il se lève.
So he gets up.
Mesdames et messieurs, ne vous inquiétez
Ladies and
pas.
gentlemen, don't worry. My master.
Il est assez connu le maître, donc la plupart des gens le connaissaient dans l'avion.
His Holiness
m'a prévenu, et maintenant je comprends pourquoi il m'a envoyé télégramme.
He's actually warned me.
Et là il commence à chanter des chants sacrés.
And please repeat after me. They've started actually chanting mantras all together. Half of them, half of them were crying with the plane that was, diving. And
qui se raccroche au siège parce que quand ça pique, c'est en apesanteur, quoi, du coup. Et le gars, aucun doute, quoi. Il chante tranquille, tu vois.
And they
et finalement, ils ont trouvé une grande plaine dégagée.
ended up finding a safe place to land. No crash.
Mais c'est juste pour dire qu'il
Just to say that,
pour moi, la fin de la peur, ça a à voir avec la foi.
The end of fear has to do with total faith, trust.
Par exemple,
when I went to India, when I moved to India,
donc j'avais plus rien du tout. J'avais juste mon passeport.
My wallet was stolen right before. I just had my passport and I was going for 6 months, maybe even forever because I was really leaving France. So I had nothing left. So you are in the metro. You have to go take your plane, or rather you don't go, but I did. I did go. And it had to do with trust. I don't care. All right, I don't have money. I don't have... Life will help me. In situations like that, with, life and death situation, you can see how connected to faith you are. I know of someone in Bali. He fell ill. He was eating one day. He felt like he was pretty much leaving the body, really. He kind of knew, I'm going to die, and the second thought was, I don't care. And I asked him if he had any fear left, and he said, no. Yeah, he's lived, I know him, so he's lived lots of shamanic experiences, so he knows that he keeps on going. There is a moment of... the mind needs a bit of time to integrate this idea that, not idea, but that this fact that death doesn't exist, it takes a bit of time to integrate that irrational fears are not useful. Well, it's not irrational to fear plane. Well, it is irrational if you're not in a situation of danger. And what's the worst that can happen? The worst is the body dies, but you can't even run away from it. You can't if you crash. So there's really no need to worry. It's a great exercise of surrendering. There's an interview of Eckhart Tolle who she invites him to come to her country, and so he says, yeah, all right, this time of year could come. And she says, oh, but we have a lot of mosquitoes during that time of year. Well, good. Straight away says, good, we'll be able to surrender to something then. And that's it, really. There's fear, all right, just surrender to fear then. Terror is a bit harder, of course, but it will come. It just takes a bit of time. It's just not only the this conviction of faith. It's not a mental faith. It's evidence, obviousness. And it's not enough for the body not to have any reactions. It is programmed to have reactions. We are at the crossroads between a limited and limited form, programmed to survive, which is an experience lived by consciousness that is unlimited and eternal. So, and it keeps playing with that, this paradox. So you can have reactions in the body, that's all right. The consciousness knows it's a game. And I've heard, I'm not there yet, but I've heard that there's a point where the body doesn't have any reactions even of fear anymore. I'm a huge fan of a huge white shark. There's something telling me. Something tells me, without fear you are only love, and nothing will happen to you if you. I've actually experienced things like that while driving. I've had car crashes, and I could see that there were moments of no more fears.
Alors là, j'ai pas de
Even
peur, ok. Mais si j'avais un
thinking,
accident, est-ce que ça générerait une peur?
if I was
Et
to
je
have
sens pas
a
monter de
car
peur.
crash right
Je sens
now,
monter, il peut pas y avoir d'accident.
C'est ça.
I could feel that,
Dans ces moments-là.
you
C'est
know,
vraiment,
if
ça rejoint vraiment ce que tu dis.
is there any fear
Cette
coming up?
pensée-là, elle a
No,
même pas de
because
sens, il peut
there
pas y
was
avoir d'accident.
the
Dans cette
knowing that
perspective dans laquelle je me trouve là, ça ne peut pas arriver.
it
C'est
can't
bizarre,
happen, a
je sais
car
pas
crash
l'expliquer.
can't happen,
Et c'est une conviction absolue.
and it is
Ouais.
something that is
Sur la
it's a deep
confiance
conviction.
La conscience est confiance.
Ah ouais,
Consciousness
ouais, ouais.
is
La conscience est
confidence,
confiance.
is trust.
Forcément. C'est forcément le petit moi qui a
It's
peur.
only the little me
Mais
that is
la
afraid,
conscience,
not
elle n'est que
consciousness.
confiance.
It is only pure
Pas de doute.
confidence. There's no doubt
Vous l'avez
with
vu,
consciousness.
cette vidéo de cette
Have you
fille
seen
avec
this
des tigres
video,
ou des lions, je sais plus.
this little girl with lions or
Des guépards,
tigers?
ouais.
Or
Il y en a une qui est passée aussi.
Yeah, there's also this video, you know, with wild animals, you know, like a huge crocodile, like 12 meters long, you know, and there's a guy, you know, dive into the water and just, you know, swim with it, you know, and it's so tiny, you know, well, near the crocodile, but it's impressive to see how they interact.
Mais est-ce que tu crois que c'est est-ce que vous croyez que c'est absolu ça? C'est-à-dire quand tu dis
do you think that is an absolute truth, this? If I know that I'm absolute love and I meet a white shark, then I know and nothing will happen to me?
Les chances de ton côté, mais un jour le gros requin blanc ou le lion, il y va quand même. On ne sait pas pourquoi.
Parce qu'il a faim.
En fait,
Est-ce que c'est une
Maybe someday
la question que j'aurais envie de te poser, c'est
the white shark or the lion will eat you, and that,
l'impulsion à vouloir vivre cette expérience, elle n'est pas antérieure au fait d'avoir confiance dans le fait que je vais pas me faire manger par le requin. C'est-à-dire, est-ce que c'est pas le courant de l'amour, de la conscience elle-même qui a envie
the current of love of life that pushes you to live this experience with the shark? Isn't it prior to confidence, to faith? We usually think there's some sort of chronology in life, but it doesn't exist really. The question and the answer are there, present, already together. This is why I keep saying that you are already what you're looking for, you are already awakened, because if you want it, it's because you have already the answer, it's already there. Cause and consequences are actually backwards. So awakening will happen. Just put on a GoPro.
Depuis que je suis pré-ado, c'est de sauter en parachute.
One of my dreams is to jump with a parachute from a plane. As soon as I hit adolescence, all the fears actually constructed themselves. There's a huge chance that you'll go through with that, and it will validate that you're not impacted by this fear of plane. I knew that I would live certain experiences that would validate some comprehensions I had, and it did happen. I've always known that the day I will jump with a parachute from a plane, you've always wanted it, right? Yes, ever since I was a child. Then it will happen. It's all perfect. It's so wonderful to see that it's just consciousness that is playing. It's so obvious. To dive with a parachute is quite crazy. You're in a plane, you're safe in a plane, and you dive from it, and you're afraid of planes. That's absolutely incredible. It's an incredible mechanic there.
J'étais en blablacar l'autre jour avec un parachutiste.
I was driving with someone one day. He was parachutist. And I told him that I wanted to jump from a plane. Well, to be afraid
quoi. Enfin,
It's good because there's
c'est
no
comme quand tu vas au manège, quoi.
no
C'est les
point in
montagnes
jumping if
russes,
you don't have any fear.
Et il me dit non, mais vas-y.
It's good.
Il me dit, il y a des
Go
petits
for
pas,
it.
quoi, et tout.
Ouais. C'est métaphoriquement, il y a un peu un lien
Metaphorically,
entre l'éveil et le saut en parachute.
there is some sort of connection between awakening
Et
and
justement,
parachute
ça fait un peu
jumping.
comme toi quand tu étais enfant, c'est-à-dire il peut y avoir, en général, donc ça se passe il y a une expérience d'éveil.
Usually
Et après,
there's
il y a
an experience of
l'éveil,
awakening,
voilà, au bout, mais
and
en
then
général,
there's
l'expérience d'éveil, c'est
self-realization
un petit peu le goût,
at the end of
de
it.
sauter en parachute, mais on garde la
I would
sécurité
say
quand
that the
même.
first
On peut
glimpse
pas,
of awakening is pretty much like a
on vient faire le petit
jumping
mort.
with a parachute. There's still a
Et
safety
jusqu'au
Oui,
moment
there
jusqu'au
with the
moment de la
little
bascule,
me
là,
up
tu
to the
vois.
point where there's
Mais
the
c'est
shift
assez marrant,
that
quoi.
happens.
C'est l'après qui est beaucoup mieux, quoi.
Après, quand tu sautes, c'est
Ouais,
cool.
voilà, non, mais même,
Il paraît que c'est génial.
I've never jumped myself, but I've heard it's great.
Oui. L'affronter, c'est là où tu découvres la vie, quoi.
It's when you go
C'est un truc énorme.
over the fear, you actually realize
Oui, ça, c'est
the
là que
life
tu vois
that is
l'illusion,
behind.
enfin, qu'il y avait vraiment aucune raison
You can
d'avoir ça.
see the illusion of fear. You can see that there's no reason to be afraid. There's a famous story, a master in a plane with students. They're jumping with parachutes. The master says, I have two news, two pieces of news. First is I don't have any parachutes. Second one is there's no bottom.
Oui.
Donc c'est justement, comme tu disais, c'est intéressant cette histoire de sauter, mais on voit ça.
It is interesting, this idea of jumping,
De sauter dans le vide,
this idea of jumping into emptiness, to surrender to this emptiness. Metaphorically is to actually surrender to life.
Ça rejoint ce que j'ai écrit dans La joie d'être, c'est sauter dans le vide, c'est voir qu'il n'y a pas de vide dans lequel sauter.
Voilà.
To jump into the emptiness is to realize that there are no such thing as emptiness. It's just you being here. It is as simple as that. We've projected a whole story about, surrendering to life like a jump. But when we do it, we realize that there's no such thing as a jump.
Il y aura jamais, on ne touche pas.
You never touch any.
Ouais, c'est vraiment ça.
You never reach.
On n'atterrit jamais nulle part.
Ouais,
You never land anywhere.
touche jamais le sol.
Oui, on touche jamais le sol.
You never reach the bottom
C'est vraiment ça, ouais. C'est vraiment sauter.
or the ground. It's really that. It's jumping,
Sans jamais toucher de fond,
but
ouais.
without
Mais non, il y a
ever
pas de fin,
reaching
il y a pas
any
de fin,
bottom. There's no end. It's endless.
Moi, ça
Like
m'est
in a
arrivé
dream,
plusieurs fois de voir que je tombe.
I could feel in a dream that I was falling.
M'écraser,
I
et
will
puis,
crash,
il ne se passe jamais rien.
but it never
Je
happens.
tombe et il ne
Oui.
se passe
Ouais,
rien.
c'est beau.
Et-
Ouais.
Et en
I'm
fait, je
just
dirais que
falling.
c'est quand même s'abandonner à la vie, c'est
Just
se vivre comme
surrender
quelqu'un
to
qui
life
s'abandonne.
is to
Et le saut, il se fait
live
quand ce quelqu'un il disparaît.
as
Donc,
someone
jamais
who
personne
surrenders,
s'abandonne à
but
rien. Ça ne se produit pas. En fait.
there's a moment when there's
Il y a
even
juste
not
quelqu'un
someone
qui
who
résiste à
surrenders.
s'abandonner.
Il y a juste la croyance qu'on
There's
est
just a
quelqu'un.
belief that there's someone
cette
who's
croyance-là, elle
surrendering,
lâche.
and this belief is
Et
actually
là, il y a,
dropping,
il y a
and
toute
this
la
is
résistance qui lâche avec.
where all the
C'est
resistance
ça l'impression
resistance
d'un
is
saut.
actually drop, and that's why make it
Tu as fait
look
un
like
satsang unique au monde dans un avion.
a jump. Could we do a satsang in a plane?
Ouais. Mais,
Filmé.
ouais. Et c'est intéressant là l'histoire parce que ok il n'y a pas de fond mais il dit aussi vous n'avez pas de parachute, ça c'est important de le comprendre.
Forcément.
It is important to understand that there is no bottom, but you don't have a parachute either. It's not safe for the ego, for the mind. Awakening is not safe for the mind.
Des fois, il y a des gens qui me.
Sometimes people.
Une fois, il y a une personne qui m'a.
Actually, once,
qui m'a dit pour
someone said to me during satsang, "Who do you think you are? I am part of a lineage of great masters and
m'invectiver. Et en fait.
And awakening looks like this, like that." And she had been meditating for 25 years, and she was such in the space of this I know that she couldn't reach her true nature because what we are, there's nothing to say about it.
il n'y a pas de mental pour dire...
There's no mind to say, I know.
On connaît, mais on ne sait pas. Et la connaissance, c'est pas un savoir.
Knowledge is not a learning and information. The true knowledge is to realize that through which everything is known. That is true knowledge. Realize that through which everything is known. That through which. I don't know if it's clear, but there's a fundamental here. If you take that away, there's nothing left. So find that through which everything is known. That is true knowledge. And it's a knowledge, not a learning. We are with that. It's not a learning. It's so simple. It's way too simple for the mind to learn it in a way. Because the mind likes complicate. The ego likes when it's shining, and but it's not that.
C'est trop simple.
It's so simple.
C'est une simplicité
This simplicity
entière, sans
is full, without any concession.
C'est comme maintenant.
It's like now. We don't notice now yet.
Parce que maintenant est trop simple.
Because now is too simple.
Parce que qu'est-ce qui reste s'il y a
But
plus la
what's
seconde d'après, la seconde d'avant?
left when there's not the next second or the second before? What's left?
Est-ce que vous savez pourquoi
Do you know why Eckhart Tolle or Mooji,
pourquoi ils utilisent
why do they use
le terme de Dieu
this term of
pour
God
parler de la
to
conscience?
talk about consciousness?
Est-ce que
Eckhart, il en parlait quand même rarement.
Eckhart doesn't talk about it much,
En tout
a
cas,
little, but
dans ses livres, je
not
vois
in
deux,
his
trois fois
book.
le mot.
dans les
Actually.
vidéos, en tout cas,
He does in his videos.
Ouais. Alors, ce mot-là, c'est pas évident de l'employer parce que
It's hard to
en plus, en
use that
France,
term,
c'est
especially in
pas notre
France.
culture.
It's
Mais
not our
déjà,
culture.
ça passe un peu mieux peut-être aux États-Unis. Et puis
It might
peut-être qu'il
be
l'utilise pour
simpler
parler de
to
la
use it
présence
in
à
America.
des gens qui ont
But
une certaine vie
It's easier to talk
spirituelle
about presence
dans un
to
contexte
people.
religieux, et là il va leur parler avec ces mots-là.
He will talk to
Mais en
people who
général,
have
ce
some
qu'on
sort of
essaie de
religious
faire,
spirituality.
c'est d'utiliser les
But
mots qui parlent.
usually
Tu vois, à ta
we
culture,
use terms that are relating to the culture. United States, they're quite religious, very
Puis bon, Mooji en Inde,
believers.
c'est normal, quoi. Tu dis Dieu, tout le monde
And
pense
about
à la conscience,
Mooji,
c'est pas-
it's quite normal, in India,
Alors qu'en France, faut
talk
décoder.
about God in India, everyone
Parce que
knows
dès
what you're
qu'en
talking
France, tu
about.
vas dire
But in
Dieu,
France, it's
waouh.
different. If you say
Regarde tout ce qui
God
se
in
passe,
France,
quoi.
look at
La
what
montagne
happens
de
if you
concepts
say,
ajoutés, quoi.
if you say
Et
God
la
in France,
distance,
so many
comment c'est
concepts
loin.
that are added on,
Il est
and
loin,
how distant it is, how far from us it is, can barely hear us.
Donc,
et en même temps, il y a quand même
And yet there's still
des personnes qui, dans notre culture, l'utilisent aussi. Enfin, même vous, quand vous parlez du divin, par exemple.
ouais.
Alors,
Yeah, you
qu'est-ce
talk
que
about
vous
the
pouvez en
divine.
dire
So what can you tell us about
ouais, d'utiliser
using
ces concepts.
those concepts, divine concepts?
Dans un premier temps, déjà, c'est le Dieu
First of all
intérieur.
is to
C'est
talk
pas un Dieu
about the
compris à l'extérieur.
inner God,
Donc
not
ça
something
a un
exterior.
rapport avec,
So it has
la
to
façon
do
dont c'est vécu intimement.
with how it
Et,
is lived
et moi, je suis
intimately.
passé par là, tu sais, j'ai eu un chemin
I
vraiment
went
très
through that
traditionnel,
stage.
très,
I
très
went through a
traditionnel
very
avec, la
traditional
répétition du mantra, comme on
path,
fait en Inde.
mantra
En plus, je l'ai mis
repetition.
à ma sauce occidentale. Du
So
coup,
I
parce
did
que,
it on my own
je
terms,
sentais que le
being
mantra indien avait
from
moins
the
d'effet au niveau du
a
cœur sur
Westerner.
moi.
I could feel
Donc,
that
par exemple,
Indian
quand je répétais
mantras was having less impact as,
Si le maître
French
disait, faut
words.
répéter Shiva, Shiva, ok.
So,
Donc, moi,
Shiva,
j'écrivais
Shiva, Shiva wasn't really
pendant des
working
heures, je répétais
for
Jésus,
me,
Jésus,
so I
Jésus.
actually
Et là, ça me faisait un effet.
repeated
Je le sens, tu vois, même là, encore,
Jesus.
c'est marrant, encore une anecdote. Ça peut être un vieux truc qui
Mais
revient, mais
moi,
quand je le
trouve
dis,
que c'est
je le sens.
touchant quand tu
Jesus,
parles de
I can,
Jésus. À chaque fois que t'en parles, je suis touchée.
I can feel
Parce
it.
que il y a
Every
une
time you talk
affinité
about
comme ça.
Jesus, I can feel that you're quite connected to him. Yes, there's always been a
Je
connection.
pense
Yes.
qu'il y avait toujours un truc, même quand j'étais pas sur un chemin spirituel. Quand
Even,
j'étais petit.
I think there's a connection. Yes, even
Donc,
when
ça
I
parle
was
au cœur.
not on the path consciously.
Donc Dieu,
So,
j'ai répété aussi le même mantra que Saint François d'Assise pendant des années.
I've also
Mon Dieu,
repeated
mon Dieu, mon tout, mon Dieu, mon tout.
mantra
Parce que ça me
from
ouvrait, ça
Saint
m'ouvrait
Francis
si je
of
le sentais.
Assisi. My
Mais
God,
quand je
my
le faisais,
all, my
j'étais
God,
pas
my
trop
all.
intéressé aux mots que je disais.
I wasn't really interested in the words that I was saying, but
C'est-à-dire
rather
que pour moi, c'était
interested in
confortable de sentir
what I
la
was
présence
feeling. It
en
was
faisant ça.
very comfortable for
Et
me to
l'avantage
feel
du
that
mantra,
presence
c'est pour
when
ça
I
qu'on
kept on
a dit que c'est la
repeating
voie la
those
plus
words.
rapide,
And
mon
this is
frère.
why mantra
Parce que vous
is
voulez,
known
si
to
ce
be the
message-là,
quickest way to realize your true nature, is
c'est
to
que
use
grâce au
mantra,
mantra,
is
tu peux
because
toujours être dans la présence.
thanks to mantra you can be in
Tu peux
presence
boire
all
en
the time.
répétant
You
intérieurement
you can
ou Jésus.
Grâce à la prière
drink,
aussi,
you
parce qu'il y a
can
l'envie, par
meditate
exemple.
while repeating the
Le
mantra.
mantra, c'est plus simple, c'est juste
The mantra
ça
is
répète,
really
y a
simple.
pas,
It's just to
prière,
repeat,
enfin, y a pas la
repeat.
notion de...
There's no such.
Parce que prière, des
There's
fois, ça peut
no.
être sous-entendu comme demande.
It's not a prayer,
Non, là,
so
c'est
it's
juste
not
tu
an
répètes
asking.
le
It's
mantra.
just a repeating.
Et tu sens la présence.
It's a
Alors, au début, je le
repetition,
sentais
and you
pas.
feel the presence. At
Mais
first, I
maître, il me disait,
didn't
répète le
feel the
mantra,
presence, so I kept, my
mais j'avais
master kept on
confiance. Alors,
telling me,
je me suis
repeat
dit,
the
ok,
mantra.
s'il me
So
dit,
okay,
au bout d'un an,
all right,
tu
if they
finis
say
par
so, I
sentir le
will.
mantra.
And after something like a
Puis
year,
après, ça
I
m'a
started
habité
feeling
au
the
niveau,
presence.
physique, quoi, cellulaire. Je sentais la
I could
présence.
feel on a
Et à
cellular
un moment donné,
level
c'est
at some
devenu,
point,
cette présence, cette paix, c'est
and the
rentré.
presence
C'est vraiment la voie traditionnelle
anchored
indienne.
in me.
Enfin, même les voies chrétiennes du début, ils parlent de ça. La
And
vie
all the
locale,
traditions, even
si vous avez pas lu,
Christianity, all of them, actually, all the
très bon bouquin, ça. Justement,
keep
il y a avec la prière du cœur et tout ça. Avec
keep
Jésus.
talking about
Et ça fonctionne.
this
Ça fonctionne.
repetition. It
Parce
does
que
work
on est dans le cœur.
because we're in the
Peu
heart.
importe la voie que
It
vous
goes.
prenez,
It comes from the heart.
si vous
Whatever
êtes
the
dans le
path
cœur, ça fonctionne
you're
forcément.
choosing,
Même
if
s'il y a
you're
une
doing it
croyance
from
qui est
the
un peu
heart,
erronée
it
à la
will
base,
work.
par
Even if you
exemple,
have some sort of concepts
Saint
about it at
Francis d'Assise,
first,
il avait des croyances qui étaient
it
un
will
peu
work.
erronées à la base, mais ça
Like
l'a
Saint
pas empêché
Francis
de réaliser
had some
complètement de
concepts
soi. Mais
at
il a cru,
first,
par exemple, qu'il fallait qu'il aille
like he
convertir
thought that
tout le
he
monde,
needed to
parce
convert
que,
everyone
enfin, qu'il aille chez les musulmans, etc.
he had to go to the
Alors que
Muslims
il avait pas,
to.
enfin, tu vois, c'est pareil, tu vois, la voie musulmane, la voie
But it is the same. The Muslim
presque avec les soufis,
path,
c'est pareil.
like the Sufis, it's the same. It's a
Toutes
path
les voies
like
sont-
any other.
c'est la même
C'est
chose.
qu'aujourd'hui, le Dalai Lama, il dit pratiquez votre. Pratiquez
Even the
local,
Dalai
quoi.
Lama.
Ça pratiquait bio.
Dalai Lama kept saying, practice your
Exactement.
practice locally. Whatever
Donc,
is
tu
good
vois, je suis
by
allé
you
chercher
is good.
l'exotisme, et à la fin, les dernières années, j'étais dans des pratiques où je suis revenu avec Jésus. Alors que pendant des années, j'étais avec des trucs plus orientaux.
I've been practicing
Puis à la
with
fin, c'était tellement simple qu'il n'y
Oriental
avait plus que ça, quoi. Il y avait plus que le
practices
mantra, puis,
for long, and then I came back to
puis
Jesus.
après, il n'y avait plus que la présence. Il y avait
And then there was
à peine le
just
mantra,
tasting
et puis
presence, so
un
repeating
jour,
this
en volant dans la
mantra.
voiture,
And then one day while driving in the
j'avais
car,
demandé, donc c'était
I
très
didn't
progressif.
ask for anything. It was very progressive and
Ça s'est
just
fait comme ça, mais
happened like that
euh,
on its own.
c'est le cœur, quoi.
It's
Enfin,
it's
c'est
it's all about the heart,
l'aspiration profonde qui va faire que ça se fera,
the deep
quel que soit
inner
le chemin que tu prends.
aspiration,
C'est sûr.
and
Suyin, elle le dit d'ailleurs dans
whatever
dans la
the
joie d'être.
path you
Les
choose,
chercheurs peuvent
that's going to
dormir sur
happen.
leurs deux oreilles à un moment donné, tu dis. Ça,
You
c'est
say
sûr.
something like that in your
C'est
book,
sûr, ça va se
like
faire.
seekers
C'est même pas
can
toi qui
can
as des désirs
sleep on
mignons, donc
both their ears,
ça vient-
like
ça vient
and
déjà de la
tranquilly.
vie c'est déjà fait, quoi.
Bah oui, pour moi,
It's
c'est
already
que la
done.
conscience
If
elle-même sous cette forme en train de
you
revenir à
are
elle-même.
Exactement.
consciousness itself in a form, in a
Et moi, le
shape
mot
that
Dieu,
is
je
coming
l'utilise
back to
celui-là parce
itself.
que dans la culture,
And for me, I
bien que
use
j'ai
the
eu une
word
éducation
God,
athée, mais avec
even though I was
la culture
raised an
chrétienne autour,
atheist.
Dieu dans ma représentation, c'est
God
c'est
in
l'absolu,
my
c'est ce qu'il y a de plus
mind
absolu qu'on puisse
is the
concevoir, en
absolute.
fait, tout simplement.
Is
Mais ça,
there's
c'est dans ma
nothing more
culture. Je
absolute
serais indienne,
than
j'aurais dit
God.
le soi, tu vois, probablement.
Had I been
Donc c'est le mot
Indian, I
que
would
j'ai
have
utilisé
probably
quelques fois
used
dans mes livres pour
the
désigner
self,
l'absolu. Enfin.
but I use God in my
Et
book
maintenant,
just
je
because
l'utilise
it's in my
pratiquement
Plus
culture. But
coloré de. Pardon.
Justement, il y a un truc, il y a une mystification, donc j'utilise pratiquement plus maintenant.
Non, mais ça peut aussi être plus coloré de. la conscience, ça fait tellement
consciousness, it feels like
froid, quoi.
it feels a bit cold.
Ça dépend de chacun.
It depends on everybody.
Alors que quand tu dis divin, tout de suite c'est poétique, quoi.
Tout ça,
If you say divine, it's
Ouais.
immediately more poetic to me.
Le mot présence, par exemple, c'est celui
Presence
qui, depuis quelque temps,
has been talking to me. This word has been talking to me more lately.
Ça, me semble plus complet pour parler de ça.
Seems to me that is
De plus en plus maintenant,
a
c'est
bit
le mot
more whole,
existence.
more whole.
L'existence. Dieu, c'est l'existence.
Existence
elle-même.
is now
C'est
something that
totalité.
is
Donc,
coming
ça
to
devient
me.
encore plus simple, c'est l'existence, la vie. Il y a moins de
Life,
mystification, tu vois.
existence.
Dieu,
There's less
conscience,
mystification.
présence, déjà,
Even God,
on
presence,
peut, on peut
consciousness.
projeter des choses dessus.
It's
La vie, l'existence,
easier
ça
to
devient plus simple.
project
Et
something
c'est la
onto
même
it,
chose.
but existence and
Moi,
life,
j'utilise
it's
être parce que
Alors, être,
parce qu'en fait,
beingness. I use
pour moi,
that
j'ai vécu comme ça l'éveil.
because I've lived it
Je connais un sage de l'Inde qui dit au moment où vous
awakening.
réalisez
The
le soi,
sage,
le mot
master
Dieu
in
tombe.
India says,
Et c'est vrai.
the moment you realize the self,
Dieu tombe.
God
Dieu
drops.
tombe de son piédestal.
tel qu'il a
God drops from
Tel qu'on
his
se le
pedestal.
représentait, ça
The
tombe
way
parce
you
que-
were,
Parce que
the way you had it
Dieu
in your
se définit
mind.
lui-même dans les Écritures comme étant je suis. Il dit à Moïse,
God
dis-leur
himself
que
express
je suis envoyé.
and defines
Je suis
himself
donc
as
être, conscience d'être.
being.
Je suis
I am
je suis
that
cela qui
I
suis.
am.
Voilà, c'est ça. Je suis, ouais, c'est ça,
To
exactement.
Moïse
Donc ça c'est vraiment direct.
says
C'est du
that to
concret, tu
Moïse.
vois.
It's quite,
Donc c'est
it's
pour ça
it's
que
very
c'est pour ça que
concrete,
vous êtes tous éveillés déjà. Parce
which
que
is
vous
why
êtes-
we say
c'est
that you
évident,
are
et ça,
already
vous pouvez pas le
awakened.
nier. Et
It's
même en sommeil
because you
profond,
are
comme on a vu ce
already.
matin, vous
Even
savez
in
que
deep
vous êtes.
sleep,
Et vous
we
pouvez
were
même pas
talking
dire
about
comment
that
vous savez
earlier,
que vous êtes.
but you know that you are
être
even in deep sleep.
ne peut pas être.
So,
Il n'y a aucun non-être.
Being, this beingness,
Enfin, être ne peut pas être
non-being,
retiré. Être est tout ce
non-beingness
qui est.
doesn't exist.
Même quand il y a
Beingness
du vide,
is
il y a être.
everything.
Il y a être qui voit le vide.
Even emptiness.
Il y a forcément présence qui voit le vide.
There's a presence that
Donc, il y a être.
sees this
Et-
emptiness.
et
This
ça,
beingness
ouais,
sees
c'est
everything.
fondamental. Quoi.
It's
Et
fundamental.
pourtant, même ça, c'est un concept.
And yet,
Bah oui.
Le concept
even that
être.
Un peu le concept
is a
du vide.
concept.
Mhm.
Beingness
Et des fois,
can
je
be
joue
conceptualized.
à enlever même ça.
So
le concept
sometimes I
être,
just play
et voir
with
qu'est-ce qui
the
reste.
with taking away even this
Je peux pas
concept of
mettre de mots
being.
dessus.
You just
Quand je
don't
pratiquais le
put
bouddhisme,
any
on
words
avait
on
une
it.
formule, alors on peut dire pour la non-dualité ou l'éveil, peu importe.
In Buddhism, there was
Le bouddhisme nie l'existence de Dieu,
there
mais
was
pas
a
sa
saying,
nature. On nie le concept.
C'est
we
beau.
deny the existence of God,
C'est ça. c'est
but not
exactement
its
ça.
nature, its
Ouais.
essence.
Ouais.
Exactement.
So we deny the concept, but not the
Mais
essence.
c'est vrai que la
Yeah,
réalisation
that's
du
true.
soi
Realizing
est
the
semblée
self
d'un Dieu à l'extérieur.
has this idea of an
Donc,
exterior God.
Tout ce qui va avec.
drop.
Les prières, les demandes,
Ouais.
So all the prayers, the askings,
une
Oui,
attitude
et en
à.
même temps, tu demandes une place de parking.
and yet you
Alors, je
ask
demande pas,
for a
Oui, je sais bien.
for
mais
a
tu
car
la demandes.
park.
Je la demandais, mais tu vois, apparemment, de
I-
moins en moins.
Non, mais c'est marrant.
Mais,
I
qu'est-ce
used to,
qu'est-ce
yes,
qu'il veut
but
dire par là
less
Je
less
sais pas
now.
ce que je veux dire, mais
Ouais.
on l'appelle plus Dieu, mais on
I'm just
demande à
saying that
l'univers, quoi. Enfin,
we're not asking
comme un décalage.
we're not asking
Comme si on
God
ne sait
anymore.
pas,
It's like we ask the universe.
Ouais, mais c'est la conscience qui joue avec la conscience. Ça.
It's just
Tu te
consciousness
rends- tu
playing
peux
with
jouer, en fait.
consciousness.
C'est
You
ça,
realize
c'est
it can
un
just
jeu.
play.
C'est toi,
It's
être qui peut
it's just
qui
you,
peut jouer
beingness,
à
that
faire-
can
à avoir des places de
play
parking.
the game
ce que
of
je veux dire.
finding
C'est
a
toi le
car
créateur.
park. You are the creator.
C'est toi qui crée tout.
C'est
You
ça,
are
c'est
the
un
one
petit peu, oui,
creating
demander
everything.
une place de parking, c'est
To
pas trop
ask-
juste, c'est créer une place de parking.
C'est ça.
Ask
Ah,
for
oui,
a car
oui,
park
que
is
tu
not
crées,
quite
Oui, oui.
on
oui.
point. It's more about you create the car park.
Après, comme tu disais, tu la demandes plus, tu te mets juste en résonance.
After a while, like you said, you're not asking for anything anymore. You're just
Ben, elle est créée par défaut, mais tu
resonating with it.
tu
It's
t'alignes juste.
it's just it creates itself by default.
Tu l'as pas.
Ouais. Ouais. Donc juste être sans ajouter de concept à être. C'est
Being
ça.
without
C'est ça,
adding
mais
anything behind
juste
being,
être.
just being, beingness.
C'est cette- reconnaître que
To recognize
nous sommes ce qui est présent.
we are what
Ah,
what
ce
is
qui est en train
present
d'être.
to whatever
J'aime bien dire
is.
comme ça aussi. Ce qui est en train d'être, oui.
What
En effet.
whatever is
Et ce qui est
what
présent, ce qui est en
is,
train d'être, c'est une seule et même
what
chose.
is
mais-
present to what
parce
is
que c'est-
is
c'est
one
un- c'est
and
un-
only.
c'est conscient. C'est pas juste en train d'être,
thing.
c'est conscient d'être.
It's not
Donc,
just being, it's
c'est une
conscious.
forme que j'aime bien aussi.
It's
Être ce qui est présent et ce qui est en train d'être.
to be what is
Là, j'ai
present
rajouté des
to
choses à
whatever
être,
is
mais,
being.
Mais
But
en même temps,
I've
je finis par être.
added
C'est
on
comme
quite a bit here.
un cercle.
and yet I'm just talking about being. So
Que vous avez cité,
Je suis cela qui
la
suis.
traduction est plus compliquée que ça parce que
You talked about this I am that I am, but it's more complicated than that because in Hebrew it's supposed to mean I am what has been, what is, and what will be, but it's not really good either. The best translation would be I am what is being. I am that which is being.
Mais sans je et sans.
But without any I,
on peut enlever le je.
you can take away the I.
Voilà, c'est ça.
Celui qui est en train d'être.
C'est ça.
That which is being.
Et vu comme ça, tout ce qui est en train d'être, tout ce qui est.
And from that point of view, everything is being, and everything is that, and nothing can be withheld from that or taken away from that. And since we're talking about that, earlier you said,
c'est une bonne nouvelle. Je sais pas si vous vous souvenez. Évangile,
ah oui, c'est vrai. Mais oui, c'est une excellente nouvelle. Oui, tout à fait. Ouais.
It is a very good news indeed.
Et catholique veut dire union universelle.
Ah oui.
Catholic means universal union.
C'est une excellente nouvelle parce que tout va bien.
It's a very good news because everything is good. All is good.
Donc aussi à chaque pas du chemin.
Every step of the way.
Pour finir, ce que c'est.
To finish. To finish up.
À chaque pas du chemin, en fait.
Every step of the way,
on peut déjà
we can
vivre la joie.
Live this joy, experience the joy. There's no need to project ourselves into a hypothetical awakening in the future because the shift happens at the moment we stop seeking for it. It's now. It's absolutely now. The path is the end. It's already the end. There's no end actually, but there's no path, there's no end, but yet it's just to put words onto it. I know we need to stop seeking, we need to stop waiting, but boy is it long.